Y'all are probably looking at this picture right here and wondering, who are these guys? Well, you are looking at the picture of the first ever NFL team, 1920. The name of the team was called the Decatur Staleys, but today you know them as the Chicago Bears. And the reason why I brought up this picture is because I came across this article from the Washington Post where it is stated that since the NFL anthem protests began, you find that a lot of white NFL fans have been more lenient toward the white players and more so on the black players. That is not only so petty, but it's also not surprising at the same time. Not realizing they don't have many white players to go around when it comes to this sport of football on a professional level, hell, even on a collegiate level, because we know that in the NFL and even in the NBA that the black players dominate the field, or is for basketball, the court. So they're not going to be able to throw their weight and support around every last white player, because what's going to end up happening is now we're going to see where the bias stands, because there's not a lot of white players that are playing, whether they start or if they're coming off the bench. But it just says more so about them. And you know, their racism is showing. See, the thing is, the reason why they're doing this is because they know that they're fighting an uphill battle that they cannot win when it comes to something like this. Colin Kaepernick started this protest back in 2016, almost 3 years ago. He hasn't played in the NFL since 2017, when the season was over for him, when he was playing with the 49ers. It hasn't been on a team since. At this point, I don't expect him to be on another team ever again. But it's amazing how his impact on what he decided to do has managed to resonate even to this day, to the point where they have even lowered themselves to doing this. I can tell you this right now, before I even read this article, if let's just say that the NFL went back to looking like this, you wouldn't even have to worry about people not, let alone watching the game. They won't even go to the game. It's a reason why they integrated football, because they knew that it wasn't getting the ratings that they needed. So they needed something more. And even if they had to compromise their morals, they were thinking of the money at the end of the day. And now you see that the NFL has flourished beyond where it used to be. For all we know, the NFL could have been a dying franchise. Same thing with the NBA. But let me go ahead and read this article and see what else we can find out. Something tells me it's going to be more petty content to come. White Americans prefer white NFL stars, a preference that has gotten stronger since some players began protesting during the national anthem. Among whites without a college education, black players' popularity dropped, even in an individual player did not protest. In August 2016, Colin Kaepernick of the San Francisco 49ers, who was black, began protesting racial injustice and police violence, first by sitting and then by kneeling, while the national anthem was played before the NFL games. Soon, a small number of fellow players joined in, most of them black. The protests were very popular with black Americans, with 74% approving in one 2016 poll, and very unpopular among whites, with a 62% disapproving in the same poll. 45 jumped into this issue, arguing in the fall of 2017 that team owners should fire players who would not stand for the national anthem. Now, notice he said that they needed to be fired. If y'all don't know, Donald Trump tried to buy an NFL team years ago, but they wouldn't let him do it. Can you imagine if 45 owned an NFL team and how he would run that team? That team would be in shambles. They probably wouldn't last a season, even if they were a team that was already established. So I think that plays a huge part in, as well, as to why he keeps jumping and butting his nose into that situation. But also notice that none of those owners heeded to what he said. None of them fired the players that, if they so chose, to continue kneeling. Actually, it was 45 that caused everything to erupt into what it was. See here. It says Trump voters' opinion of the NFL plummeted. Between 2012 and 2017, the proportion of Republicans and independents who said they were NFL fans fell 12 and 15%. The league's popularity among Democrats didn't change. The controversy affected public perception of black and white players in different ways, according to consumer polling. Every year between the Super Bowl and the College Players Draft, Q Scores conducts a survey of NFL stars' popularity. They measure players' public appeal and sell that information to firms making decisions about licensing and endorsements. The surveyed group is representative of U.S. adults ages 18 to 64 in sex, age, race, and region in the country. Respondents are asked if a player is someone you have definitely seen or heard of before. If the answer is yes, they're asked if their opinion of the player is poor, fair, good, very good, or one of your favorites. A player's approval rating is the number of people who ranked him good or better as a percent of the people who have heard of him. These surveys cannot tell us how popular NFL players are in general. The poll does not bother to ask about people who are obscure or widely disliked. The marketers know their business. In 2018, the included players' median approval rating was a sky-high 85%. NFL stars are not interchangeable cogs. Even before the anthem protests, their popularity differed widely based on recent performance, past and current teams, and public persona. Most play in high-profile positions. However, black players are steered toward defensive positions and less central offensive roles. Black players are especially unlikely to become quarterbacks, which is very true, who are the league's biggest stars. All of these factors translate into player popularity. To take those differences into account, players' relative popularity in 2018 needs to be benchmarked against the differences in their ratings before the anthem protest started. For example, in 2015, white quarterback Aaron Rodgers' popularity was 13% ahead of Kaepernick's score. In 2018, Rodgers was 36% ahead of Kaepernick, who is no longer playing. Rodgers has always been more popular, but the gap between the two grew significantly. 43 NFL players were included in the 2015 and 2018 Q Score surveys. Of those, 21 are black. and the rest are white. 9 of the black players knelt, sat, raised a fist, or stayed in the locker room for the national anthem before at least one game during the 2016 or 2017 seasons. None of the white players did so. In 2015, the black and white players had the same median approval rating among U.S. adults, 82%. In 2018, the black players' median approval rating was still 82%, while the white players' median score had risen to 85%. On this measure, the gap in black and white stars' popularity rose from 0 to 3%, but that averages together everyone's opinion of the players. The gap jumped even more among white adults, whose preference for white players increased from 0% in 2015 to 5% in 2018. If we were to rank the player by their popularity among white adults in 2015, 4 of the 10 most popular players were black, while in 2018, 1 of the 10 players was black. The bar graph below breaks the changes in popularity down by audience, distinguishing between black players who protested and players who did not. The graph shows popularity among non-Hispanic whites without college education, non-Hispanic whites with some college education, and non-Hispanic blacks. Among whites, having attended college is a strong predictor of ideology and partisanship. Whites who've ever attended college are more likely to describe themselves as liberals and Democrats. They even broke this thing. It's crazy. They broke this thing down by a bar graph. It says, as you can see, black NFL players lost the most popularity. Among non-college educated whites, all black players lost ground whether they protested. Protesters lost more than 6% of their approval rating compared with white players. Non-protesting black players lost 4%. Lost popularity hurts black football players' livelihoods. Black football players already face bias in media coverage, scouting, and hiring. Marketers rely on surveys like Q Scores to decide whether to make lucrative endorsements and licensing deals. Losing popularity in these polls could bring a tangible financial penalty. Soon, this upcoming Super Bowl will cap the 2018 season. New NFL rules kept player protesting to a minimum in the fall. Nonetheless, the NFL is likely to see more partisan controversy. Professional football is exceptionally popular in most political and demographic categories, which means that if the country is politically polarized, then the NFL fans are too. Well, this was a very interesting article. It's amazing how they brought the politics into this, even though we know politics is pretty much in every facet of life. But that just proves our point right there, that even when black people want to protest something that white people can't stand it. So the only reason they like these white players now is despite the fact that black players, the ones who did decide to protest or everything like that, they didn't agree with it. But it's so crazy because you have people like Josh Brown, who beat his wife brutally, Ben Roethlisberger, who has countless sexual assault cases against him. That other character who played for the Eagles, his last name, I think, Riley Cooper, who made those racist remarks. They didn't say utter a thing about them, or they probably did, but then turn a blind eye to it. But Colin Kaepernick does this one thing for a season, and they got so upset with that, and they got mad at him, so they decided to take it out on everybody else. And watch, they're gonna try to find a way to throw this back on him and say, "See, it's all your fault. Why the fans liking us didn't go down." Well, the black players who really like when white people kiss their ass anyway, or give them all kinds of compliments, they're gonna try to throw that back all the way on him. And it wouldn't surprise me in the least bit. Maybe if y'all were in a more united front, then it would actually work in your favor. But like I said, I asked you this question. If the league went back to this, do you really think that those white players that are in favor of those white players that they are in favor of now, and let's be real here, they're only doing this because, like I said, they're doing this to spite us. They don't really like those players. They're not fans of them. They're only doing this. They're only getting on cold because they feel that their precious anthem was affected by it. And I think another thing is they didn't like the fact that it actually went from being what they thought would be a trend, but it ended up catching on to the point where you had college players doing it. You even had cheerleaders doing it. You had people singing the anthem while on 1D. And it ended up even catching a worldwide effect because some people overseas started to do it. I think that was another thing that they hated. But even though the popularity in black players dropped, it didn't drop too drastically. But if every black player was to walk away from the NFL and maybe form their own league, and their league was left to look like this, they wouldn't have that many teams. They would probably cut their teams in half. And it would become extremely boring. Now, don't get me started on the NBA, because that's where the black players really shine at. If they was to do that there, Adam Silver, his head would explode. But we'll see what happens. But I thought this was just very interesting, and I wanted to bring this commentary to you. So y'all let me know what you think about this down in the comments below. Like, share, subscribe. The links will be in the description. I will talk to you in the next one.